In other news, a German pilot project is looking to use solar power and grow fruit at the same time. The project aims to grow organic apples while producing green electricity.
Picture a barn at 3 in the morning where no human being is awake, and yet decisions are being made about which cow needs a doctor before sunrise. That is not science fiction. That is Tuesday in rural Lower Saxony. Germany does not look like a farming country. Say the word German industry, and people picture robotic arms welding car doors in Stuttgart, or engineers in white coats fine-tuning a turbine in Munich. Nobody pictures a cow. And yet, quietly, without press conferences or product launches, German agriculture has become one of the most technologically advanced food systems on the planet. A system so precise, so automated, and so data-driven that it now resembles the assembly lines of Wolfsburg more than it resembles the pastoral image most of the world still holds in its head. Less than 1% of the German workforce works the land. That fraction feeds more than 84 million people inside the country and exports enough surplus to matter well beyond its borders, generating tens of billions of euros a year. To put that in perspective, fewer people work in German agriculture today than work for a single large airline, and yet the fields, barns and processing plants they run collectively outproduce entire nations twice their size. This is not an accident of good soil or lucky weather. It is the result of decades of engineering applied to something humans have done since the Stone Age. Growing food, until growing food started to look like manufacturing. To understand how strange this transformation really is, you have to start with the machines nobody expects to see moving on their own. Drive past a large arable operation in Saxony-Anhalt during sowing season, and something looks subtly off about the tractor crossing the field. The driver is there, coffee flask wedged next to the seat, but his hands rest quietly in his lap. A satellite-corrected steering signal is doing the driving, following a pre-mapped line across the soil with an accuracy no human hand could sustain hour after hour. There is no drift, no overlap, no wasted seed at the edge of a pass. What looks like a small technical detail turns into an enormous financial one when it is repeated across millions of hectares, year after year. Fuel not burned, fertilizer not wasted, seed not doubled into the ground. Multiply a 2 or 3% efficiency gain across the scale of German cereal farming, and you are looking at value that used to simply evaporate into the earth, now captured instead. Above those same fields, drones and multispectral cameras patrol for signs of stress invisible to a farmer walking the tree line. A patch of wheat quietly wilting from root rot, a corner where drainage has failed and the crop is yellowing from below. These are caught early enough that a problem which once would have consumed an entire field is now treated in a single contained pass. Underneath all of it sits software that pulls together yield maps, soil samples, weather feeds, and machine sensor readings into something closer to a spreadsheet with a fence around it than a traditional field. Different zones within the same plot receive different seed rates and different fertilizer doses, based on what that specific patch of ground actually did the year before. The question German farming asks today is no longer simply, how much can we grow? It has become, how precisely can we grow it? And that shift in the question has quietly rewritten the entire industry. Nowhere is that rewriting more visible than inside the dairy barn, because milk is the backbone of German agriculture. The country holds the largest dairy herd in the European Union, close to 4 million cows, producing more than 30 million tons of milk annually, a river of raw material that feeds one of the continent's largest food processing sectors. But it is not the volume of milk that reveals the transformation. It is how the milk leaves the cow. For generations, milking dictated the rhythm of an entire household. The alarm went off at 4:30 because it had always gone off at 4:30, twice a day, without holidays, without exception, whether or not it suited the animal being herded toward the parlor. Step inside a modern robotic dairy today, and the first thing that strikes a visitor is silence. There is no crowd pressed against a gate, no shouting, no forced march. There is the low sound of chewing, the occasional clank of a feed barrier, and somewhere, a machine breathing softly through its cycle. A cow decides on her own schedule to walk toward a milking unit in the corner of the barn, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day rather than the traditional twice. A sensor reads the transponder on her collar and instantly retrieves her age, her lactation stage, her production history, whether she is due for treatment. A robotic arm moves beneath her, laser sensors mapping the exact position of her udder, which shifts slightly as she ages, and differs from every other cow in the herd. Brushes clean the teats. Cups attach one at a time with a short pneumatic hiss, and the milk rises through a clear line in warm, pulsing surges rather than a steady stream. While it flows, the system is already testing it. Yield from each quarter of the udder, temperature, conductivity, which shifts measurably at the earliest biological stage of infection, often before any human eye could notice a symptom. Anything abnormal is diverted before it can contaminate the bulk tank, and the animal is flagged for the farmer's attention. She is being screened for illness multiple times a day without anyone standing over her. A smart collar around her neck keeps a separate, parallel record. Rumination time, one of the most reliable early indicators of sickness in cattle, tracked through the rhythmic movement of her jaw, activity levels. That spike in a distinctive pattern when she comes into heat, allowing insemination to be timed with a precision that once depended entirely on an experienced stockman's eye. Step counts that can reveal a developing lameness days before any visible limp appears. All of it funnels into a single dashboard. The farmer opens a screen in the kitchen before dawn and sees the herd ranked by urgency. 3 animals flagged, 2 likely in heat, 1 with rumination down by more than 10% overnight, which becomes the first animal found by torchlight before breakfast. This is not a machine replacing the farmer's judgment. It is a machine telling the farmer exactly where to aim it. This same logic, comfort as a financial strategy rather than a sentimental one, governs the design of the modern German barn itself. A stressed animal is an unprofitable one. Stress suppresses immune function, fertility, and yield all at once. Cubicles are sized and bedded so a cow lies down and rises again without catching a hip, because she needs close to 12 hours off her feet every day, and every hour she does not get comes straight out of the tank. Flooring is grooved for grip, because a cow that slips once afterward moves like an animal that no longer trusts the ground beneath her, walking less, eating less, producing less. Enormous fans turn slowly overhead not against the cold but against heat, since cattle tolerate warmth far worse than most people assume, and German summers now run hot enough, often enough, to dent output without intervention. And then there are the rotating brushes mounted at cow height, which spin the moment an animal leans into them. A piece of equipment whose entire function is that the animal enjoys it, installed purely because contentment, in this system, pays for itself. None of this abundance comes without waste, and Germany's answer to that waste has become one of the more unusual features of its farms. 4 million dairy cows and more than 20 million pigs generate an amount of manure that is difficult to imagine until you are standing beside the pit that holds it. Under Germany's strict water protection laws, that pit is not a minor inconvenience, it is a serious legal and financial liability, since nitrate leaching into groundwater remains one of the most contested issues in German farm policy. The response has been to stop treating that waste as waste altogether. Slurry is pumped into sealed, domed biogas digesters that now stand beside farmyards across the country, rising and falling gently as gas collects beneath their covers. Inside, in total darkness and without oxygen, bacteria break the material down and release methane, which runs a generator that feeds electricity directly into the national grid. The leftover heat is piped into farmhouses, into barns, sometimes into grain dryers at harvest, and occasionally into an entire neighboring village. Livestock, energy, and crops are folded into a single closed loop on a single piece of land, a disposal cost quietly converted into a revenue stream. That same industrial logic, applied even harder, defines Germany's pork sector, the industry behind the bratwurst stalls that anchor every festival and Christmas market in the country. Germany currently holds around 21 million pigs, yet the number of farms keeping them has collapsed by more than half over the past decade and a half, even as the average operation has grown several times larger. The animals stayed. The farmers left. What remains is a staged production pipeline. Piglets born on breeding units, weaned onto solid feed under close observation during the most vulnerable point of their lives, then moved into vast fattening houses where sensors continuously read temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, and ammonia, adjusting fans and inlets automatically. Because pigs cannot sweat and bad air converts almost instantly into respiratory disease and stunted growth. Feed recipes shift automatically as the animals mature, since feeding a market-weight pig like a newly weaned one wastes expensive protein, and feeding a weaner like a mature animal stunts it permanently. At slaughter, German processors handle tens of millions of pigs annually, feeding an industry with hundreds of distinct regional sausage traditions, an entire cultural identity resting on a supply chain that has been almost completely industrialized behind the scenes. Not everything, however, has surrendered to automation, and the parts of German farming that remain stubbornly human are some of the most revealing. In Bavaria, rows of poles rise 6 meters into the air, strung with wire, forming what by midsummer becomes a dense green corridor of hops, supplying breweries in well over 100 countries. Every single shoot on every single plant must be wound by hand, clockwise, around its wire, because that is the direction the plant naturally twists, and a bind trained the wrong way simply unwinds and falls. No machine has ever managed to replace this step. Growers walk the rows bent at the waist for weeks each spring, and when harvest finally comes in late August, it turns brutally fast, because a picked cone begins losing its value almost immediately and must be dried within hours to lock in the oils and acids that give beer its bitterness. Germany's asparagus obsession tells a similar story. Each spring, the country loses its collective mind over a vegetable. Roadside stalls appear overnight, menus are rewritten, and the average German eats well over 1.5 kilograms of it a year. White asparagus depends on a single, delicate condition. The spear must almost never see the sun. Grown in raised ridges of sandy soil chosen because it warms quickly and lets the spear push upward without twisting against a stone, the plant stays white only as long as it remains buried. The instant a tip breaks the surface, sunlight triggers discoloration within hours, and the value of that spear collapses. Harvesters walk the ridges up to twice a day, feeling for the faintest crack or dome in the sand, and cut each spear individually by hand with a long, narrow blade. A task no machine has ever been built to replicate, resting the entire economics of the crop on seasonal labor, arriving for a few intense weeks each year. And yet, for every field still worked by hand, there is a combine harvester performing 4 separate operations simultaneously as it moves through a field of winter wheat, the country's dominant cereal, sown in autumn precisely so the crop can root before the cold and surge upward in spring with months of extra growing time behind it, one of the central reasons German wheat yields rank among the highest in the world. 2 drivers hold their vehicles within half a meter of each other so an unloading auger can pour grain from a moving combine into a moving trailer without either machine stopping, because in a country where the gap between ripeness and rain can be measured in days, that continuity is worth almost anything. All of this, the robots, the sensors, the digesters, the drones, the precision to the centimeter, produces genuine achievement. And it comes at a real human cost. Farmers sell into global commodity markets they do not control, accepting whatever price arrives on a monthly statement regardless of a drought on another continent or a disease outbreak in a country they have never visited. Costs for fuel, feed, and fertilizer keep climbing, often precisely when output prices are weakest. Strict environmental and welfare regulations, however necessary, demand large capital investments, a rebuilt slurry store, a converted barn, on farms that may employ only 2 or 3 people. To remain competitive, families borrow heavily against milk or wheat prices that can collapse without warning, and when they do, the loan schedule never moves to meet them. The number of farms in Germany fell from close to 300,000 in 2010 to roughly 255,000 a little over a decade later. Nearly 45,000 operations gone, an average of close to 9 farms disappearing every single day. The losses falling hardest on smaller, fragmented holdings in the south that simply cannot expand the way flatter, larger farms in the north can. So what should this be called, success or failure? Both answers hold up under scrutiny. Germany cannot compete on raw acreage against the world's agricultural giants, so it competes instead on yield per hectare, on integration between sectors, on wasting almost nothing. But the very technology that lets a farm survive is the same technology that makes it unaffordable to remain small, quietly raising the bar of what counts as viable until another family falls beneath it. A food system capable of feeding 84 million people while losing 9 farms a day is not a finished story. It is a country still deciding, field by field and barn by barn, what kind of agriculture it actually wants to become. One where the farmer is served by the machine, or one where the machine simply outlasts them.